Welcome back to Revise and Resubmit, the podcast that takes, those really dense academic papers and makes them surprisingly interesting. I'm Pavlov.
And I'm Nikita.
We've noticed a lot of you are tuning in, which is amazing, but I haven't quite hit that subscribe button yet.
Yeah, and that little button, honestly, it's so small, but it makes such a huge difference in helping us reach more people with these important discussions.
Right.
You know that feeling, right? That pull towards nature.
Oh, definitely.
Whether it's just like finding a bit of green space in the city for lunch, or planning that big hike, or, the annual trip to a national park.
It feels pretty universal.
Totally. And the numbers back it up. Over 325 million visits to U.S. national parks just last year. I mean, wow.
Yeah, that's huge. It really points to something deep, doesn't it? Some kind of fundamental connection.
Exactly. And it's not just, oh, nature's nice. There's actual science looking at how this stuff impacts us.
Right. A whole body of research digging into the psychological side, our feelings, our thinking, even how we interact with each other.
And that's what we're doing today, our deep dive. We've gone through a ton of research to pull out the core benefits, the affective, the cognitive, the social stuff that nature interaction seems to give us.
Basically trying to connect the dots from the research.
Yeah, our mission for you listening is, to cut through the jargon, get straight to what these studies are telling us.
So you can see how it might actually apply to your own life, your choices.
Think of it as your shortcut, getting clued into this whole area of psychology.
And we looked at a real mix of studies, short-term experiments, what happens right after you see some nature, to longer-term stuff like what are the effects of living near green spaces? And even trying to figure out what exactly about nature does the trick.
Okay, so let's start with feelings. The affective benefits, as researchers call them. How does nature make us feel? What's the big picture?
Well, the main finding is pretty consistent. Being in nature generally boosts positive feelings, happiness, joy, calm.
Right.
And it tends to reduce negative feelings like stress, anger, anxiety.
Okay, makes sense.
But interestingly, a big review found the effect on increasing positive feelings is actually quite strong, maybe moderate to large, while the effect on decreasing negative feelings is a bit smaller, maybe small to moderate.
Huh. So it's maybe better at actively making us feel good than just stopping us from feeling bad. Is that fair?
That's one way to look at it, yeah. There's a potential asymmetry there. Nature seems particularly good at giving us that positive lift.
You mentioned some specific studies. I think the researchers did their own work comparing different walks.
Yes, exactly. They had people walk in a nature conservatory or an indoor mall or just measure them at baseline. The nature walk significantly boosted positive affect compared to both baseline and the mall walk.
Okay.
But here's the interesting part. Both the nature walk and the mall walk reduce negative affect by about the same amount.
Yeah. So just getting out and moving, even in a mall, helps with the bad feelings.
Seems like it.
But the nature part specifically adds that extra dose of good feeling.
That's what it suggests, yeah. Something unique about the natural space for enhancing positive mood.
That resonates. Okay, what about when our minds get stuck? Worrying over and over. Rumination?
Right, rumination. That repetitive negative thinking, it's really linked to depression and anxiety. And yes, studies show nature can help dial that down. One study found a nature walk not only reduced self-reported rumination, but it also led to decreased activity in a brain area called the subgenual prefrontal cortex.
Wow, actual brain changes.
Yeah, and that area is often implicated in depression.
And this isn't just for generally healthy people. Does it help those really struggling?
Good question.
Yes.
Another study specifically looked at people with major depression.
Okay.
They actually induced rumination first, got them thinking negatively, and then had them walk in either nature or an urban setting. The nature walk resulted in a greater mood improvement.
Even after being prompted to ruminate, that's powerful.
It is. And another piece of research suggested that this reduction in negative affect, feeling less bad, might be the key step that then leads to less rumination.
So the emotional relief helps quiet the mind.
Got it. Okay, the big one. Stress. Does nature help us chill out?
Absolutely. That's one of the most studied areas. Researchers look at stress hormones like cortisol.
Right. And physiological signs like heart rate, blood pressure, and also heart rate variability, or HRV.
HRV, that's like your body's flexibility in responding to stress.
Exactly. Higher HRV generally means better stress resilience.
And does nature help with these markers?
Consistently, yes. An early, really influential study found people recovered from stress faster after watching a nature video compared to an urban one. And a more recent review confirmed that walking in nature enhances that heart rate variability.
So it literally makes our bodies better equipped to handle stress? That's amazing.
It appears so.
Okay, so being in nature is great, but what if you're stuck inside? Does just looking at a picture of a forest do anything?
Interestingly, yes. The benefits, especially the effective ones, aren't limited to real-life exposure.
Really?
Yeah. Studies using pictures, videos, even VR simulations of nature have shown positive effects on mood.
Huh.
Now, the real deal probably has a stronger effect.
Sure.
But the fact that even simulated nature works is pretty promising, especially for, people who can't easily get outside.
Yeah, definitely. And I know personally, I just prefer looking at nature scenes over like cityscapes. Is that common?
Oh, absolutely. That preference for natural overbuilt environments is really well documented going back decades.
Okay.
And crucially, that preference seems linked to the effective benefits.
Yeah.
The more people like a scene generally, the more it boosts their mood.
Oh, wasn't there a study that complicated that a bit? Something from the researchers' lab?
Yes, good point. This raises a really important nuance. They did a study where they carefully matched nature and urban images so that people rated them as equally aesthetically pleasing.
Okay, took preference out of the equation.
Exactly. And when they did that, they didn't find a significant difference in mood improvement between the nature and urban images.
Whoa. So maybe it's not nature itself, but just that we usually find nature prettier.
That's the implication.
Yeah.
It suggests that a lot of the effective benefit might stem from our aesthetic preference,
Right.
rather than something uniquely inherent only to natural stimuli themselves.
Yeah.
Preference could be a key driver.
Huh. Okay. That's a really interesting twist. Let's switch gears then. What about thinking? The cognitive side. Does being in nature make us sharper?
Well, it's not like it instantly boosts your IQ.
Right.
But yeah, there's solid evidence that interacting with nature can improve certain cognitive functions compared to being in built environments.
And the studies look similar to the mood ones, like comparing nature exposure to something else.
Pretty much, yeah. Similar experimental designs, often random assignments, sometimes within subjects where the same person experiences both conditions.
Okay.
And they use all sorts of nature interactions, walks, VR, videos, just looking at pictures.
And how do they measure if our brains are working better? Is it just asking people how focused they feel?
They sometimes use those subjective measures, like the perceived restorativeness scale,
Right.
where people rate how mentally refreshed they feel. But the researchers really emphasize using objective cognitive tests.
Why focus on the objective tests?
Well, a couple of reasons. First, just knowing you're looking at nature might bias how restored you report feeling.
The placebo effect idea again?
Kind of. And second, especially in real-world studies where it's obvious if you're in a park or on a street, people might report what they think they should feel or what they think the researchers want to hear. That's called demand characteristics.
Got it. So the objective tests give a cleaner picture. What do they show?
Meta-analyses, those studies that combine results from lots of other studies, show reliable improvements in a couple of areas.
Like what?
Working memory is a big one.
That's like holding information in your head.
Exactly. Your mental workspace. Often tested with things like the digit span backward task, repeating numbers in reverse order,
Okay.
and also cognitive flexibility, the ability to switch between tasks or ways of thinking. The trail making test part B is a common measure for that.
Connecting the dots, literally.
Right, alternating between numbers and letters. There's also some improvement seen in attentional control, though maybe not quite as consistently as the other two.
That's fascinating. So nature helps our mental juggling and flexibility. Does this apply across the board?
Well, there's encouraging evidence that these working memory benefits are seen even in people with major depression,
Oh, wow.
and also in children with ADHD.
That's really promising. But it doesn't fix everything, cognitively speaking.
No, and that's a really important point. The meta-analyses haven't found reliable benefits for all cognitive functions.
Such as?
Things like basic visual attention, sustained vigilance, like watching a radar screen, impulse control, and just raw processing speed don't seem to consistently improve after nature exposure.
So it's specific.
It seems to be, yeah.
Yeah.
More research is needed to really map out the boundaries, What exactly does it help with, under what conditions, and what doesn't it touch? For example, how demanding does a task need to be before you see these restorative effects? Still questions there.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've covered feelings and thinking. Let's move to the social realm. How does nature affect how we connect with others? Does a walk in the park make us nicer?
Maybe not instantly nicer, but there's definitely a growing link between nature exposure and more pro-social attitudes and behaviors.
Pro-social, like being helpful, generous.
Exactly. Studies have found people are more willing to donate money after walking in a park, or even just after seeing nature images or videos compared to urban ones.
So just seeing a nice landscape can make you open your wallet more.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
And it seems to go a bit deeper, too. Other research found that viewing nature images reduced people's focus on self-centered values and increased their endorsement of more pro-social, other-focused values.
Interesting. It shifts our perspective outward. Any ideas why?
One prominent idea involves the feeling of awe. Yeah, that feeling of being in the presence of something vast and overwhelming that makes you feel kind of small in comparison. Think Grand Canyon, Starry Night. That feeling of awe is thought to reduce self-focus and promote connection to others, which could drive pro-sociality. But it's not just about epic landscapes. Even everyday nature seems to play a role. One study had people simply pay more attention to nature in their daily lives for 2 weeks.
Just notice it more?
Yeah. And they reported increases in pro-social orientation and connection to others afterwards.
And I think your lab looked at this connection idea too.
You did. We found people visiting a nature conservatory reported feeling less self-focused and more connected both locally and globally compared to people visiting an indoor mall. And that was even after controlling for how many other people were around.
So it wasn't just being around more people in one place.
Right. And in a follow-up, looking at hundreds of parks in Chicago, we found visits to parks rated as more natural were linked to feeling more connected to people nearby. Again, controlling for the number of visitors.
So the quality of the green space matters for social connection.
It seems to suggest that, yeah.
Yeah.
Although we still need to directly test if those feelings of connection actually lead to more helping behavior in those specific contexts.
Right, the thought to action link. Okay, what about the flip side? Does nature reduce negative social stuff, like aggression?
There's evidence pointing that way too. Lab studies have shown that after being socially excluded, yeah, people who then viewed nature scenes reacted less aggressively than those who viewed urban scenes. Same pattern after cognitive fatigue. Nature seemed to buffer against aggressive responses.
And outside the lab.
Some really interesting quasi-experimental evidence from public housing residents.
Okay.
People randomly assigned to apartments with more nearby greenery showed reduced aggressive tendencies compared to those with less greenery.
Wow, just having trees outside your window.
Seems to make a difference. And our own cross-sectional work found lower rates of both violent and nonviolent crime in neighborhoods where people reported visiting parks more often. And that held even after accounting for socioeconomic factors.
Yeah.
Interestingly, we didn't see the same effect for museum visits.
So it wasn't just about having leisure activities available, something specific about the parks.
Potentially, yeah.
Okay, and one more social angle, our relationship with the environment itself. Does nature make us more green, more pro-environmental?
That's another area researchers are exploring. Some studies show watching nature documentaries boosts sustainable behaviors and donations to environmental groups.
Okay.
There's also a correlation between how often people visit nature and their pro-environmental actions. This might be mediated by feeling more connected to nature itself.
Feeling part of it makes you want to protect it.
That's the idea. Although one study found nature exposure increased pro-environmental behavior even without increasing that measured connectedness. So there might be multiple pathways.
Interesting. Okay, we've talked a lot about seeing nature. What about hearing it, smelling it, touching it? Do other senses matter?
Oh, absolutely. This is a really cool emerging area. While vision has dominated the research, there's growing evidence for benefits through other senses too.
Like sound?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our lab actually found that listening to natural soundscapes, birdsong, water sounds, improved working memory performance compared to listening to urban sounds like traffic.
Just the sound.
Just the sounds. And other studies show natural sounds can speed up stress recovery and improve mood, independent of visuals.
What about smell? You hear about forest bathing.
Shinrin-yoku, yeah. That research often looks at airborne chemicals released by trees called terpenes.
Terpenes, okay.
Reviews suggest exposure to these, often through just breathing forest air, is linked to psychological benefits like reduced stress, and even some positive effects on the immune system.
Wow. Do you have to consciously smell them?
That's still a question. Whether the benefits require conscious awareness or happen more subtly isn't fully clear yet.
And touch. That seems less obvious.
It's the least studied sense in this context, for sure. But one recent study was quite neat.
Yeah.
They found that simply touching real grass led to greater feelings of comfort and relaxation and reduced anxiety compared to touching artificial grass.
Huh. Just touching grass.
Yeah. It's early days for tactile research, but it's suggested.
So if all these senses contribute, maybe that's why being in real nature feels so much richer than just a picture.
That's a very plausible hypothesis. The benefits might be additive or maybe even synergistic more than the sum of their parts. It could explain why real-life exposure often shows stronger effects than simulated or single-sense exposures. And that's why researchers are now trying to create these richer, multi-sensory virtual nature experiences too.
Right, trying to capture more of that real-world complexity. Okay, so we have these different buckets of benefits, affective, cognitive, social, but surely they're connected in real life, right? How do they interact?
Great question. And yes, it's highly likely they are interconnected. We've already seen examples, right? Many studies find simultaneous improvements in mood and cognition after nature exposure. However, when researchers pooled data from multiple studies, they actually found that the positive affect boost and the working memory improvement weren't strongly correlated.
Oh, so maybe they're driven by different mechanisms.
It suggests there might be some separation, yeah. Different pathways leading to different benefits.
And didn't we talk about preference being linked to mood, but maybe not cognition?
Exactly. Remember that study where they matched nature and urban images for aesthetic preference? Affective benefits disappeared, but they still saw some cognitive benefits from the nature images. So cognitive restoration might not depend on you actually liking this scene as much as mood improvement does.
That's really interesting. Okay, what about the social side? How does that link to feelings or thinking?
Several proposed links there. We mentioned awe, an affective state potentially driving pro-social behavior.
Right, feeling small makes you more generous.
Kind of. Also just the fact that urban parks are social spaces, improved mood, and maybe those self-transcendent feelings from nature could just make interactions there more positive.
Makes sense.
And then there's the cognitive link. Remember the study on reduced aggression in housing projects?
Yeah, with the greenery.
They found evidence that improved working memory partially mediated that effect.
So thinking better helped them act less aggressively.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Better executive function, maybe better impulse control, stemming from the nature exposure, could lead to less aggression. It points to this idea of a shared resource, like directed attention, that helps both cognitive tasks and regulating social behavior. Similarly, feeling less mentally fatigued might allow us to direct more attention towards others, boosting that sense of social connection.
So lots of potential connections.
Definitely potential links, but teasing out the exact causal chains requires more specific experimental work. We're still figuring out precisely how these different benefits influence each other.
Okay, so we know nature does all this good stuff. Let's talk about the big why. What are the main theories trying to explain these benefits?
Well, historically, two big theories from the 80s really dominated the field for a long time. Stress reduction theory, SRT,
SRT.
and attention restoration theory, RT.
Okay, SRT first. What's the gist?
SRT basically says that non-threatening natural environments trigger an innate response that lowers physiological arousal stress and increases positive feelings.
So nature calms us down.
Right. And the cognitive benefits, like better focus, are seen as kind of a happy byproduct of being less stressed and feeling better emotionally. It has this psychoevolutionary angle we evolved in nature, so we're wired to find it restorative.
Okay. And RT, attention restoration theory.
RT focuses more directly on cognitive resources, specifically directed attention. That's the kind of effortful focus we use for work, studying, avoiding distractions.
Right, the mental energy that gets drained.
Exactly. ART proposes that certain environments can help restore this depleted resource. It identifies 4 key characteristics of restorative environments.
4 characteristics.
Yeah. Extend feeling like you're in a whole other world big enough to explore. Being away. A sense of psychological escape from routines and demands. Compatibility, the environment supports what you want to do there. And critically, soft fascination.
Soft fascination.
What's that? It means things that gently capture your attention without requiring effortful focus. Think clouds moving, leaves rustling, water flowing.
Ah, interesting but not demanding.
Precisely. unlike, say, watching traffic, which demands hard focus. Art argues that environments rich in soft fascination allow directed attention to rest and replenish.
And nature often provides that soft fascination.
That's the idea. While RT doesn't say only nature is restorative, it suggests natural settings frequently possess these four qualities. So, RT predicts we should see cognitive benefits, especially on tasks taxing directed attention after nature exposure. And it hints this cognitive restoration could also underpin social benefits, like better impulse control.
So SRT is about reducing stress first, RT is about restoring attention first. Were there other early ideas too?
Yeah, two others worth mentioning are the biophilia hypothesis.
What?
Biophilia is the idea that humans have an innate, possibly genetic tendency to affiliate with nature because of our evolutionary history.
An inherent love of nature.
Basically, yeah. And then there's prospect refuge theory. This suggests we prefer landscapes that offer both prospect, wide-open views to see opportunities or dangers, and refuge, safe, sheltered places to hide or rest. Think of wanting a campsite with a good view, but also some tree cover.
Seeing without being seen, almost. How do these explain the benefits?
Biophilia and prospect refuge mainly help explain why we're drawn to nature and why we tend to feel good or safe in certain natural settings, so they primarily address preference and effective benefits. Though, as we mentioned, there's some hint prospect refuge might relate to cognitive benefits too.
Okay, but you said these early theories don't cover everything. Why need newer ones?
Exactly. Some benefits, especially the social ones or the effects of very brief exposures, aren't fully explained by SRT or RT alone. So newer theories are trying to fill those gaps or offer different mechanisms.
Like what?
Well, you have things like relational restoration theory and collective restoration theory, which focus specifically on how nature might restore social resources at the level of pairs or whole communities.
Okay, zooming in on the social side.
Right. Then there are theories focused on how it works. The perceptual fluency account suggests natural scenes are just easier for our brains to process visually, and that ease feels good and restorative.
Easier on the eyes, literally.
Kind of. Conditioned restoration theory says we learn to associate nature with positive feelings through past experiences like classical conditioning.
So good memories of picnics make parks feel good.
That's the idea. And relatedly, some suggest perceived benefits might be partly due to our expectations knowing nature is supposed to be good for us. A sort of placebo component.
Power of belief.
Then there are a couple of recent, more integrative theories trying to pull lots of threads together. Nature-based biopsychosocial resilience theory.
That's a mouthful.
It is, but it basically argues nature builds resilience across biological, psychological, and social domains. And the goal discrepancy account suggests nature helps us close the gap between our current state and desired state, maybe by helping us adjust goals, reframe situations, or even achieve goals in nature.
So lots of new thinking happening.
Definitely. There's been a real surge in theoretical development recently, which is great because it pushes the research in new directions.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, so we know nature is beneficial and we have theories why, but what is nature visually? What makes a scene feel natural?
That's a fundamental question, isn't it? We all have an intuitive sense, but pinning it down is tricky. Our research shows naturalness is a really basic way people evaluate environments, even when comparing different types of parks.
So even within green spaces, some feel more natural. What visual features drive that perception?
We've looked into low-level visual features. And this applies to sound too, by the way, looking at acoustic features.
Okay.
In vision, one really interesting feature is edge content.
Edges, like lines.
Yeah. Overall, more edges tend to mean more natural think leaves, branches versus blank walls. But digging deeper, natural images tend to have fewer straight edges and more non-straight curved edges.
Curves versus straight lines again.
Exactly. This pattern holds across lots of image types. Even in architecture, curvy buildings often feel more organic.
Why do curves matter psychologically?
Well, research links curves to lower threat perception. Sharp angles can feel subconsciously dangerous. Curved paths feel more inviting, maybe more engaging. And the cool thing is, these effects can happen even with scrambled images, where you just see the edge patterns.
It's a really basic visual processing thing.
It seems to be tapping into something fundamental. Another key feature is fractalness.
Fractals, like repeating patterns.
Right. Recursive patterns you see at different scales, think ferns, coastlines, tree branches. Natural scenes are often rich in these fractal patterns.
And that matters because?
Fractalness is linked to aesthetic preference, faster stress recovery, and that perceptual fluency idea, they might be easier for our brains to process. And interestingly, fractalness often correlates with having more non-straight edges.
So these low-level features, curves, fractals are part of the natural recipe, but it's not just geometry, right?
Oh, definitely not. Higher level features like, is there water? Are there trees? What kind of trees? Are obviously crucial for perceived naturalness and preference. How these high-level features interact with the low-level ones is still an active research area.
Okay.
And we're even looking at image-level things like memorability. Some early evidence suggests natural images might actually be less memorable than urban ones.
Less memorable. Why?
Maybe linked to that processing fluency idea. If they're easier to process, maybe they don't stick as strongly. Still exploring that.
So a whole mix of visual ingredients, low-level patterns, recognizable objects, overall image properties.
Exactly. And understanding these properties is key if we want to maybe design built environments that capture some of nature's benefits.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, let's connect this back to our minds. We know nature has benefits. We know it has certain visual features. How does seeing nature actually change what we think about?
Yeah, this is where some of our own work really tried to link those visual features directly to thought content.
How did you look at that?
We started by analyzing thousands of journal entries left in those TKF Foundation urban parks, the nature sacred sites.
Right, the park journals.
We used topic modeling to see what people wrote about. Generally, it was positive, reflective stuff, life, family, nature itself.
Okay.
Then we got online ratings of how natural each park looked, and we measured the visual features, like edge content, from photos of the parks.
And you found connections.
We did. Parks rated as more natural had more journal entries about nature. Makes sense.
Sure.
But more strikingly, parks with more non-straight edges, more curves, had more entries about spiritual and life journey topics.
Whoa, so the visual design was linked to deeper, more reflective thoughts.
That's what it suggested. The physical form of the space seemed to influence the psychological content.
That's wild. Did you test that experimentally?
We did. We ran online studies showing people different images, natural, urban, varying in naturalness and edge content. We directly asked them what they were thinking about afterwards. And we found causal links. More natural images led to more nature thoughts. Images with more non-straight edges led to more thoughts about spirituality and life journey.
Wow.
And here's the kicker. These effects replicated even when we used scrambled versions of the images.
Scrambled, so they couldn't tell what it was a picture of.
Exactly. Just the abstract patterns of edges and colors. And still, seeing more non-straight edge patterns led to more spiritual life journey thoughts.
That's incredible. So just the basic visual input shapes our thoughts, even without recognizing the scene.
It really points to a fundamental influence of these visual features on our cognition and thought content. Huge implications for design, right?
Yeah.
Public spaces, workplaces, maybe even retail.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Consumer psychology. How might all this apply in, say, a shopping mall or a high street?
Well, the research suggests adding natural elements, trees on the street, plants inside could definitely impact consumers.
How so?
For one, the mood boost and stress reduction could buffer against the negative aspects of shopping environments, like crowding or noise. That might make people feel more comfortable, maybe stay longer, have a more positive experience overall.
Makes sense. What about decisions? We can be impulsive when shopping.
Yes. There's evidence linking nature exposure to less impulsivity. Remember the delay discounting finding. Viewing nature images made people more willing to wait for a larger reward. And our own work found people reported less general impulsivity and less impulsive buying, specifically when they were in a nature conservatory compared to a mall.
So nature might make us more considered purchasers.
Potentially. And relatedly, other studies show focusing on nature can reduce materialism, how much importance people place on possessions.
Really? How?
It seems to be mediated by an increase in those other focused altruistic values we talked about earlier. Less focus on me and my stuff, more on connection.
That's a fascinating potential effect on consumer culture.
It is. It suggests natural environments could subtly shape consumer values and behaviors. Though again, we need more research on how durable these effects are once you leave the natural setting.
Right. And what about eco-friendly buying? Does seeing nature make us buy green?
It seems plausible, doesn't it? If nature interaction increases pro-environmental attitudes and behaviors generally, that could translate into more sustainable consumer choices. We know nature documentaries and green advertising can influence intentions to buy eco-friendly products.
Yeah.
And in the current climate, that's obviously a huge area of interest. How can we encourage more sustainable consumption? Nature might be one piece of that puzzle.
This really brings up the question of how we value nature societally, doesn't it?
Absolutely. We see it reflected partly in things like property prices, views of parks, or water command a premium.
Right.
But there's also research suggesting people often underestimate the well-being benefits they get from nature. There might be a mismatch between the economic value we place on it and the actual psychological value it provides.
So we might be systematically undervaluing green space.
It's possible. And understanding that better, using the kind of research we've discussed, could have really significant policy implications for urban planning, public health, conservation.
Wow. This has been incredibly rich. So many layers to how nature affects us. To kind of wrap things up, what are the key takeaways for listeners?
I think the main thing is just the breadth of the impact. Interacting with nature isn't just a minor mood booster. It has measurable effects across our emotions, our thinking, and our social selves.
Affective, cognitive, social, the whole package.
Pretty much. And remember, it's not just about climbing mountains. Even short exposures, even simulated nature, even just hearing natural sounds or touching grass, it all seems to contribute.
Okay, so as a final thought to leave people with.
Maybe just.
Yeah.
Consider your own daily environment, how much nature is woven into it. Even small things, the sounds you choose to listen to, the view from your window, a plant on your desk.
Yeah.
Think about how those small encounters might be subtly shaping how you feel, how you think, how you connect with the world. Reflect on that balance between the natural and the built in your life. And maybe ask yourself, are you undervaluing the nature that's already around you? And don't forget to subscribe to Revise and Resubmit on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you're enjoying the show and want to support us in creating more insightful content, consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Every contribution helps us continue this journey of exploration and discovery. Until next time, keep those minds curious, keep questioning, and keep revising and resubmitting.